Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer turned career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. But after years of exploring personal and career development, business, money mindset, and energy work, I'm here to tell you that yes, you can move from stuck and defeated to empowered and confident. Ready to dive in? Awesome. Together, let's ditch the struggle. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. If you are someone who has anxiety, has had panic disorder or panic attacks, this is the episode for you. I learned so much and I could relate to so much what our guest Jeanne talked about today. And I learned a whole bunch of new things. You'll hear me having kind of an aha moment in real time. And I'm also going to just ask you to excuse my voice today if a little bit of a cold, a little bit off, but we're doing it anyway. So let me read the little bio of Dr. Jeanne Retief. She is the founder of FIGGI Beauty and FIGGI Soul, where she shares her journey as a highly sensitive soul navigating anxiety, life transitions, and skincare struggles. Diagnosed with panic disorder in her late 30s, she experienced firsthand how stress, hormones, and major life changes like her hysterectomy impact both skin and soul. Through FIGGI, she blends science-based skincare with a soul-centered approach to self-care, empowering others to embrace both their sensitivity and strength. Jeanne's work is a testament to the powerful connection between emotional well-being and skin health, offering a compassionate space for those seeking balance, understanding, and a little grace. And yes, we will talk a little bit about skincare at the end, so let's dive into the conversation. Hi, Jeanne. Welcome. I'm thrilled to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, when I heard your story, I thought yes, yes, and yes, because there's a lot we have in common. Everyone's story is totally different, but I know you've had an interesting journey with being a sensitive person, anxiety, and I would just love to dive in right at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about how your whole path has begun.
Well, oh gosh, that's a book. I just came from run-of-the-mill humble beginnings. I was raised in a family with a lot of generational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of abuse in my house, of all kinds. I had divorced parents. They had their own issues and demons that they were fighting. I grew up basically always walking on eggshells, and I learned from an early age that to avoid this really horrible feeling of dread I have, I should just fix things and make sure nothing is wrong. So always apologize, make sure everybody's happy. And this led to me being very anxious and very sensitive. But this was not something diagnosable, It was just, why are you so sensitive? What's wrong with you? Why do you cry so much? Why do you act this way? Why can't you handle stress? Why don't you meditate more? Like these types of things. That led me into a human rights career and my own kind of path towards destruction and horrible behaviors. And in 2015, I was finally diagnosed with panic disorder. So I think that was obviously a long time coming, but I didn't want the diagnosis. It wasn't at a time where it was so prevalent as it is today. I didn't even know something like an anxiety disorder existed. I was so mad at my doctors because I absolutely believed that they were just diagnosing me with this made up thing because they can't figure out what's wrong with me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that journey to acceptance was quite a brutal one. But yeah, I've left out many parts, but that's in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like being that sensitive person and going through things. So do you identify with being like an HSP or highly sensitive person? I know that label gets thrown around a lot. Do you identify with that? Does that resonate with you?
Yes, it does resonate with me. But I'm so glad you brought up the word label because I'm very clear in my journey and how I speak about my journey that diagnosis is unbelievably important. Especially for people like me who are medically diagnosed, who really do struggle. It becomes a lot more of a struggle when there are a lot of voices claiming to have this or self-diagnose, not understanding what this all encompasses. So
Mhm.
yes, I do identify as an HSP. It's something that you can't necessarily diagnose, but if you're working with the right therapist and psychologist, they can guide you into that. Um, and it leans into my wiring, my anxious
Yeah.
wiring.
Yeah, it's the wiring, and I shy away from labels too. However, some of us are just different, and we
Yeah.
operate differently, and if there's one thing I could, really change about looking back on my childhood or how I went through things is understanding how I had to operate and how I was operating differently from others. And I mean, I can remember coming home from birthday parties all the time and just like barfing my guts out. And my mom would say it's because of too much junk food or whatever it was. But it was really, I was overstimulated and it was too much for me. The whole thing was just too much. And that's kind of a common theme that I think comes up for a lot of people that experience anxiety or panic disorder. Suddenly things that become too much, but they're not too much for someone else. And then we have a lot of shame and guilt around the fact that, like, why can I not just meditate through this? Why can I not just walk through this like a normal other person? There's a lot of like judgment.
Oh, no, there is for sure, and I'm not taking away any of that. I mean, I obviously live with panic disorder, so I really, really understand the difficulties
Mhm.
in that. And I agree that, yeah, it's our wiring is just different, and we need to understand how to read our manuals. But
Mm.
that does not necessarily mean that we are broken or need to be fixed, right? And I just feel like we've maybe entered a bit of a phase where um, there is, for me, a very clear difference between an anxiety disorder and somebody struggling with overstimuli at a sensitivity level, and somebody proclaiming on social media that they have such anxiety because they didn't have the right milk for their latte this morning. I mean, it's just two completely different
Yeah,
worlds.
there is a
And,
spectrum, and I love that you are pointing that out. There's absolutely a spectrum, and there's yes, please, thank you,
you
because
know,
social media really likes to lump everything into one big cluster, right?
correct. And also, the thing is, we are having a human experience on this earth.
Mhm.
And that necessarily entails that we're not going to just have the fun experiences. Nobody wants to be angry. Nobody wants to be frustrated. Nobody wants to be sad or grieving, you know, and nobody wants to be stressed or chronically stressed. But everybody goes through those phases in their lives. And sometimes we need a little bit more guidance to get us through that. But it leans into this whole thing that I've just made an example of how you define an anxiety disorder, right? Just because you don't want to deal with the difficult emotions in life does not mean that it is necessarily anxiety. I just want to always make that so clear, but be extremely careful in how I phrase that so that those listening understand that if you do struggle with anxiety, I know it's real.
Yeah.
I'm living it and I have so much empathy for you. But there's a very real need for a clearer conversation around this.
So, yeah, I'd be curious then to understand how you define the anxiety disorder or how it was defined for you so that you like had this label that was helpful. What is the difference between someone who has an anxiety disorder and just someone who experiences anxiety?
Yeah, so I think the difference is, first of all, to understand that anxiety disorder is kind of the main name for a group of different disorders. So if you have anxiety disorder, you should definitely be diagnosed professionally, but also by somebody that understands the different types of anxiety disorders so that you are diagnosed with the right type so that you have the right tools in your toolkit. How it was explained to me is when I was diagnosed, this was very stigmatized, and the thing was just, or the reasoning was, oh, you're just stressed and you can't handle stress the way other people can handle stress. And this gets stuck in your mind. And again, you go through the whole thing of you're broken. But the thing is, stress is normal. It's actually good for you in small doses because it helps you perform and it helps you identify danger when there really is danger. And in any normal functioning individual, your stress levels will go up. Whenever the situation that caused that stress goes away, they naturally go down again. So you had a stressful day at work, whatever stressed you out gets resolved, and you're okay. Your nervous system resets, and then you go through the normal flow of that process again. When you have an anxiety disorder, you are physically and mentally incapable of making that distinction. So you never come down from that stress high. You're always buzzing, always overthinking, always shaking, always feeling like something is wrong, always, in that kind of hamster wheel, going, 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 going. And of course, your system gets completely overloaded and it starts getting confused and sending the wrong signals. So there's nothing to be afraid of, but your brain is telling you you need to run. An avalanche is coming. And it's because of this complete overdrive and overstimulation of adrenaline, cortisol, everything rushing through your body. So you don't get that normal reset. And it doesn't matter if you take away whatever situation was causing you stress. You're still inexplicably feeling this intense anxiety.
Mhm.
So, that's also why my husband and I, we have code words so that he can understand where I am, on what level, and what kind of help I need. So if I were to go home at the end of the day and say I'm stressed, absolutely, no worry about that. I had a bad day, I'm stressed, I had a bad meeting or whatever. If I say I'm anxious, that's kind of like the yellow light. Okay, I'm heading towards a bad place. I'm still kind of in control. We need to employ my toolkit. And when I say I'm panicked, it's like, okay, everything has failed. The cliff has come closer. The edge has dropped.
Yeah.
No more meditation. Now it's just kind of SOS.
So, what are some of the physical and emotional symptoms that really came up for you with your anxiety disorder?
I would say the first one and the most persistent one that I remember the most and have the most references to throughout my life prior to my diagnosis is gut symptoms. So I used to, anywhere between once and twice a month, I would have like food poison like symptoms. So vomiting, diarrhea, upset tummy, can't eat anything, can't stomach anything. And I used to get so upset about it because I just couldn't understand why. Like, am I eating the wrong thing? How can I be so sick so often? Um, After my diagnosis, I obviously got to understand a lot more about the connection between anxiety and your gut and, your second
Mhm.
brain. So I've been through all of the tests. I've done the Crohn's disease, the celiac disease, SIBO, inflammatory bowel disease. So I was diagnosed with irritable bowel disease after ruling out all of these things. I've done low FODMAP. I've done anti-inflammatory diet. So that is a huge symptom for me, and
Okay.
it's usually the first one that freaks out when I'm on the path towards destruction. The others that I do experience quite often and that I've now begun to learn are triggers or warning signs for me is insomnia. My problem is not falling asleep. I go to bed and I am, before my head hits the pillow, I'm like exhausted, absolutely comatose, blacked out. And then 2 hours later, I'm just awake and I cannot fall asleep again. And it's so frustrating. And you're so tired, and being tired is not good.
Yeah.
Migraine attacks, that comes with the whole aura thing and the dizziness and the vomiting, and the nausea. Then I also have, you know, it's difficult to explain it that way, but if you have panic attacks, then you will understand. So I put it in quote marks, the more irrational difficulties like fear of crowds, of loud noises. Loud noises are huge triggers for me. So if a pot falls on the
Oh,
floor or
yes.
something, I'm instantly triggered. Lots of lights and sounds and busyness around me. So airports are difficult for me. Um, and then my skin. My skin was another huge symptom.
So, what would happen to your skin?
So my skin was, I've always had sensitive skin, and now I understand why, but after my diagnosis and I started having rolling panic attacks, it was much worse. So I would have this feeling of crawling and itching and burning on my skin. So I would be scratching, literally scratching wounds in my skin because I would be so convinced my skin is burning. It literally feels like the air is burning my skin. Redness, blotches, breakouts I never ever had an issue with, dry patches. Um, but you will also often hear people who struggle with eczema or rosacea or shingles. They will often describe it as having a flare up. And then if you pay attention to it and you look back, it will most often be at times when you were super stressed and it just had this
Oh,
flare. And
yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah.
reason, yeah, yeah, yeah. So the reason for that is that your brain releases this dump of cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream when you're that anxious. And that shoots to your nerve endings to get you ready to fight, to flight.
Yeah.
And
Fight the saber-toothed tiger that's coming your way.
yes, exactly. And most of your most sensitive nerve endings are just beneath the first layer of skin. And that's why it causes that kind of inflammatory reaction, which can show up as breakouts, redness, burning, itching, flare ups in eczema, psoriasis. So it's not just like a kind of a mental connection, it's a mental body connection. Your skin is your largest organ. If stress can affect your gut and your heart and other organs, it would only make sense that it will too affect your largest organ through a very true biological process.
Yeah, that is so wild. I can really relate to a lot of what you're talking about, the symptoms, the burning of the skin for sure, the tingling, and it's so alarming when it happens. And
Yes.
I mean, then there's the anxiety that happens from the symptoms because you're having the anxiety, which brings the symptom, and then the symptom brings on more anxiety, which I think they call health anxiety. So it just like it's a spiral and it's a loop that's really scary to feel.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, it's this overall dump of things that happen. And taking the skin reaction into account, one of the things that happen to you during a panic attack or anxiety is this feeling that you have, I have to get out. I need to get out. So how do you get out of your
Yeah.
skin? Like
Yeah.
it makes it so much worse and so much more intense.
Did you find that the intense physical symptoms were almost motivation to really get to the root cause of what was going on for you?
Yes, because I had no other option but to do that. My first huge panic attack happened when I was traveling in my previous life, for my human rights career. And I was in a hotel after all my meetings. I started losing my vision. First, it started blurring. Then I had
Mhm.
purple and black spots, then completely lost my vision. I started shaking badly and uncontrollably. I lost feeling in my left arm, hand, left leg, left foot. I started having intense heart palpitations. This feeling that I was choking, that I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning around me. It's very, very scary. Like, I can sit here and explain these symptoms to you like this now, but when that's happening to you in that moment, it also coincides with this feeling that you're going crazy, that you
Mhm.
must be going insane, which is a horrible feeling to have. The best way I can describe it is we all have a relationship with death. We all have some kind of fear of it or some kind of something that we wish we knew more about it. Maybe your listeners have had a near-death experience. Having a panic attack is literally like facing death.
Mhm.
Imagine having to face death so many times,
Yeah.
so consistently, how traumatic that experience must be on your body, on your mind, on your soul. Um, so yeah, when it happened to me the first time, like I said, I had no idea something like an anxiety disorder existed. I thought I was having a stroke. So I went through all the tests. I went through all the neurological tests, the MRIs, the gastroenterologist, the blood work, everything to see what was physically or what had physically happened to me. And after all of that was ruled out, I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and then later with panic disorder.
It really is so frightening, and the way you're describing it, like, I had my first real panic attack, I was 19 and I was at college, and it was, like, right outside a classroom, and I had a lot of your symptoms, but I didn't have the seeing the black and was it black and purple and, like, losing vision? Like, I had the room feeling like it was closing in on me, and it felt distorted like you were in a weird movie, but I didn't have the, like, complete loss of vision. That must have been complete so terrifying.
Yeah, it really was. It's definitely not fun to live through that.
Mhm.
Um and I'm so glad you shared your symptoms because that's another key differentiator. There is a difference between anxiety attacks and panic attacks. And the key differentiator there is with a panic attack are those two things. You are absolutely 1000% certain and convinced this is your last breath. You are dying. And two, you're going crazy. You're losing your mind. You're going
Mm.
insane. Um, and that's just a horrible combination of things
Wow.
to feel.
I didn't realize it was those 2 specific differentiators between anxiety and panic. I mean, I in my head, I guess it was more panic was just not just, but a more elevated version, but that's really helpful, I think, for a lot of people to understand the difference.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but that's how
Yeah.
it's been explained to me to
Yeah.
help me and to assist me in understanding. Because there are a lot of overlaps with an anxiety and a panic attack. The heart palpitations,
Mhm.
the sweating, the shaking, the feeling like you need to get out, like
Yeah.
everything's closing in on you, hyperventilating. Um, yeah, but that was described to me as the differentiator, and then the differentiator between an generalized anxiety disorder and a panic disorder is that you start to change your behaviors, your normal everyday behaviors in order to not have a panic attack again.
Mm.
So, for example, I completely stopped eating for 2 weeks, because I had this fear of choking and that I couldn't breathe, and
Oh
I
my
just
gosh.
was so scared to put anything in my mouth or in my throat. Now when I have panic attacks, sometimes my worst would be that, and it sounds like it's not that bad, but it becomes really bad because I have responsibilities, I have a child. Um, I stop leaving the house. Sometimes I even stop leaving my bedroom
Mm.
because you're trying to avoid anything that your mind is telling you, "Oh, careful, the last time you did this, you had a panic attack." So it's hard to take yourself out of that mental narrative and reclaim your position amongst the living.
Yeah, it's like you just have to shut down and it does become scary, and I absolutely understand that feeling of, like, not wanting to put yourself in situations that just might trigger you, might set you off. And then the physical exhaustion, can we just talk about this, that comes from the anxiety attacks, the panic attacks? I mean, you really do have they call it a anxiety? It's like a hangover of
Panic
anxiety.
hangover.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you feel so depleted, like you've run a marathon, you also feel like you slightly have the flu. You're mentally, emotionally tapped out, and so to recover from that is really hard.
Yeah. If you just think about the amount of trauma and adrenaline that's been released in your body,
Mhm,
it really is like you've just run a marathon that you haven't trained for. So everything that just literally shot up crashes down.
mhm,
And for me, the panic hangover can last anywhere between 48 hours and 2 weeks, sometimes depending on how bad my panic attack was, if I had rolling panic attacks. And it's extreme exhaustion and fatigue, like
mhm,
sleeping like the dead, horrible depression,
mhm.
because obviously everything's just dumping down. And then also, just this whole ruminating and overthinking bit, like, what did I do wrong? Why did this happen to me again? Is it something I didn't do? Is it something I missed? It's a process to get out of that. It's not having a panic attack and then being okay and going on with your life.
Yeah, no, and it's so I really appreciate you being so transparent about these symptoms because I feel like I've made so much progress, but as we're talking, I was at an event in December, and I didn't feel good. And now I'm like, oh, I was actually having I really was having a panic attack, but it was a little bit different from what I had experienced before. But now you're talking about what all these things. I was like, oh my gosh, I actually was going through. It took me days to recover from this event. And
Oh.
I had a huge amount of inflammation in my body also after, which was interesting. But that's one thing that I've had to learn. I don't know if for you, but not every panic attack was exactly the same for me, or anxiety attack. And um, so when they were different, I wouldn't really catch on to what was happening, as I'm literally telling you in real time. I'm just cluing into one I had like 4 months ago. Um, yeah, were they different for you? I mean, there was maybe common denominators, but did sometimes it go a little bit off the rails or in a different direction and you didn't know what was happening?
Um, I want to say no because mine tend to be very kind of common denominator. It's very rarely something that comes on that I can feel, oh, okay. When I look back 3 days before that, I wasn't feeling so great. It's always very suddenly. It usually, the worst ones happen when I'm at my most relaxed. On
Oh,
holiday, when I'm taking a weekend off and I can go to bed early. That's usually my biggest trigger. And my common denominators are always this literally sitting here and being completely fine and all of a sudden being convinced I'm dying and not being able to breathe. It's like a switch just
wow.
flips. And yeah.
Do you think it's maybe when your body's feeling more relaxed, it feels safe to purge or to go through that experience? Like, or is it just, I mean, I've had the same thing happen. I'm totally fine. I haven't shared this story before. I was once teaching a class, I used to teach graphic design, and literally out of the blue, I'm teaching like magazine design, and I go through a panic attack. I had to literally flee the building, like just like, see guys, gotta go. I said I was having a migraine and bail. Came out of the blue, and I could not understand why it was happening at that moment. Like, why? You know?
Yeah. I think we forget sometimes that we may forget, our minds forget, but our bodies remember, right?
Yeah.
So everything you've been piling on and stacking up for the past couple of months, it's staying somewhere
Yeah.
in you. And for me, at least, I feel like when I am at those points where I'm my most relaxed, it's kind of like you let your guard down. So I
Mm.
don't have the little soldier standing in front of the door going like, "Oh, panic attack, you're not welcome here." You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like they go
Yeah.
on holiday too, and then there's this, like, free for all.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I would just love to know, like, if you could just have a conversation with your body. It's like, why this moment? You know, like,
Yeah,
I know we're storing it all, and it's like we think we're fine, but we've literally, 2 weeks ago went through, insane stress or trauma or whatever it is, and it's going to show up at some point. Like, you can only keep it at bay for so long if you're not consistently kind of working on your emotions and processing. So that leads me to asking you, what are some of the things in your toolbox? What are some of the things that you've had to do in your life to really help you thrive with your anxiety? And I want to talk about that because I know you're not letting this shut your whole life down.
yeah, so, I mean, I think this also comes back to what we said in the beginning of this, making sure there's no misunderstanding as to what it is to be living with an anxiety disorder. It really is an everyday, all-encompassing thing. Sometimes I really wake up, like, I had it this morning where I just feel like, "I don't wanna do this anymore. I'm so tired of fighting this.
Mhm.
I'm so tired." Because you cannot skip a day. Every single day I've gotta wake up. I've gotta make sure I meditate or I have some silence for myself. I've gotta check in. Okay, what kind of am I sleeping enough? If I haven't slept enough, what am I doing? I need to make breaks in my day to do my exercise so that I can release that anxiety. Um, I've got to be very careful with what I eat, how much I eat, and when I eat so I don't get hungry and shaky and nauseous because that's a trigger for me. Um, because my gut is so triggered by my anxiety, that's a trigger. So I have to be very careful with eating anti inflammatory foods and not avoiding lactose and things like that. And by the way, everything that I'm naming now has been proven by a doctor that has been working with me,
Mhm.
with my nutritionist. So, it's all of these things that you have to kind of keep together. It's a lot of work. It's
Mhm.
not, you know, fun and games. And it's hard to figure out what your triggers are. It's hard to walk that path. It's taken me over 5 years and I'm still learning some of my triggers. Now, I will say that some triggers I'll never understand because panic disorder often comes from complex post traumatic stress. Um, so there will always be things that trigger me from that abuse story or whatever the trauma was in my past that I don't immediately link to that, and then it can trigger me. But other things I know now that trigger me is lack of sleep. So when I'm not sleeping well, I need to immediately curb that and think, okay, I need to improve my bedtime routine. Why am I not sleeping well? Am I working too late? Am I using too many digital screens?
Mhm.
Because if I don't, then it is going to lead to a bad place. The other tools I use is for sure meditation, but not like yogi pose that was so destructive to me in the beginning because I had so much anxiety about not being able to meditate. And
Yes.
everybody it's like they give you this rule book. Oh, okay, you have anxiety, you should meditate.
Mhm.
Okay.
And you should do it
That
this
doesn't
specific
solve
way.
problems. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I had to learn that meditation for me just means literally anything that quiets my mind. If that means gardening or sitting on my swing reading a book or going to bed 2 hours before my bedtime and just drinking my cup of tea and staring out space, that to me is meditation, but I had to learn that. One of my other triggers is this feeling of being hungry. So always travel with protein snacks. Always have your meals 2.5 to 3 hours out of space. Um, there are many, many tools, and then there are kind of SOS tools I need to use because I do travel a lot. I do have to show up in the world in a way that's uncomfortable for me. So I have very good noise canceling headphones, which helps me with the auditory
Mhm.
overstimulation. I never go into an airport without dark glasses because that helps me with the oversensitive lighting. Um, I have very specific clothes that I fly with that are not too scratchy or too discomforting. Um, just these small little things that help me navigate the world in a way that my kind of map calls for.
Yeah, and I loved at the very beginning you said you're kind of in your manual. Did you say your manual for how
Yeah.
you work and tapping into that? And I mean, I do think there's a huge amount of self-awareness that is developed because of panic and anxiety. Like I've written a blog post about this. I do think panic attacks are a gift because they show you what the mind is capable of and they really make you and your subconscious what it's capable of. And it really makes you get in tune with your body. And so you do spend the rest of your life doing all these things you're doing, figuring out what meditation works for you. I love that you talked about that. For my favorite meditation is staring at trees. Like that's
Yeah.
all, you know what I mean? Like I love it. And it is meditation because it is. It just is. It doesn't have to be this structured thing. But yeah, these experiences you go through to develop that level of self-awareness that you have and to recognize that, yes, you need to put in the work is, I think, a huge gift because I would rather live someone who's conscious of what's going on with me than to be completely unconscious. And I just feel like this is the gift of this journey.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. It really helps you to understand how you can be the best version of you and for others. Now, would I, if I had a choice, have chosen for this to present itself differently or work differently for me? Probably. If I accept that this is the way that I am built and this is the way that I am wired, I can for sure find it within me to seek out the little jewels
Mhm.
that come with it because I owe it to myself to enjoy this gift of life that I've been given. And I owe it to the people who love me and who support me to take responsibility for the way that I am wired.
Yes, beautifully said. And so how are you now thriving? I know you are an entrepreneur, you have a family, you have really built a lot of special things based on in part based on your story and your journey.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's hard to say I think anybody that tells you they're doing great or they're not doing great is not giving you the whole truth, right? It depends on the day, it depends on the hour, it depends on the space, it depends on the circumstances. Naturally, how you're doing will change. In the whole global scope of things, I'm proud of myself for how I am managing this and handling it. But it is for sure very hard sometimes. I don't want to kind of skim over that, So many times you will hear motivational speakers or these wonderful business superheroes say things like, "Oh, in the beginning it was so hard and I worked from my garage, but now everything is fine and I'm a billionaire." Well, let me tell you, my days in the garage are absolutely brutal, horrifying, many, many tears cried, many sleepless nights, many wishes of could've, should'ves, would'ves. It's very real. Um, so it depends. It depends on the challenge, it depends on the day. Um, but I always try to go back to three main questions, especially when it's been very hard for me and I find myself in a position, which I often do when it's hard, where I'm overthinking and it's getting hard for me to see anything outside of this huge problem I'm shaping in my mind. Um, and then I try to always just step back and ask myself, okay, well, am I healthy? Am I happy? Am I a good person? And that sounds really simple, but what does health mean to you? Are we talking about physical health? Are we talking about mental health? What does happy mean to you? Does happy mean your business, your family? So, it's a big check-in to then go, okay, am I healthy? Am I happy? Am I at least doing my best to be a good person?
Wow, those are amazing questions. Simple. I love that. And introspective. I love the introspective questions. So I'd love to hear more about your skincare line, which I know is born in part because of your sensitivity. And I know the people listening can't see how beautiful your skin is, but you are glowing. And I want to hear about not only the products, but how that became, how your sensitivity story is, intertwined into this business that you've built.
Yeah, so I think Figgy skincare came about out of real desperation. There was so much about my panic disorder that I couldn't control, so I wanted something at least that I could. I've always loved skincare, and I know this wonderful ingredient from South Africa, my native South Africa, rooibos tea. I don't know if you've had it.
Yes, absolutely. It was I
Okay.
feel like in Canada about 10 years ago, it became, like, really popular. It was all over the advertisements, like, even Tetley was making a rooibos tea. So I think a lot of our listeners would be familiar with it.
Yeah. So, it has so many literal decades of scientific evidence behind its anti-inflammatory properties. If you take it as a tea, 8 cups a day, it's been scientifically proven to be cancer preventative,
Oh.
diabetes preventative. A new study came out last year which proved that it had significant impact on irritable and inflammatory bowel disease because of its anti-inflammatory properties on soothing the gut. There are so many studies about its topical application, so it's in all of our products. And I mean, I come from an international human rights background, so it's always so important for me to stress that I went back to school to do a certificate in cosmetic chemistry because I did not want to just bottle something
Mm.
for sensitive skin. I wanted to know exactly how it worked, exactly what percentages I needed, exactly what the research and the science showed are common irritants for sensitive skin. So it took me 3 years in research and development to just launch the first 4 products. And so much energy and love has gone into that. And it truly is just, rooibos is such a huge part of my life. And I really feel it's such a gift to, like nature's gift to sensitive skin.
Yeah, nature is generally the place to go for anyone sensitive for mind, body, spirit,
Yeah.
anything. I feel like that's where we need to connect back to. It's like so integral. That's why I say I have to stare at trees when I'm really freaking out or having that, it's like there's so much there. And it sounds like you've really tapped into that.
I hope so. Our feedback for it is really, really great, but it's hard to congratulate yourself on things sometimes because you always feel like you can improve and be better. But I mean, I'm proud of this line because, as I said, it was born out of desperation and tested on my own skin. So I truly know how much love and energy and work has gone into this.
And what's one of the biggest lessons you've learned from becoming an entrepreneur?
Oh, there are so many. I think one of the biggest lessons probably is and this sounds easy, but I'll explain it, to not sweat the small stuff because of how I'm wired, because of how my brain works. I will literally spend hours of my day worrying about $50 I could have saved on a hotel I need to travel to when I have a $15,000 product bill to pay. You start losing perspective because there's so many things to stress about and there's so much going on. It's almost like your system starts shutting down and you're like, okay, well, I can only stress about 3 things today and I'm choosing these really stupid ones. So, just kind of always checking in with yourself and stepping out of that. And that's the hardest part because that's also which comes with panic disorder is this obsessive behavior. I become completely obsessed with what I'm doing. I won't eat, I won't drink water. I will just sit here and completely be zoned into what I'm doing and getting up and
Mhm.
leaving the room, even if it is for a walk around the garden or a run on the treadmill is so key,
Yeah.
helping you avoid getting stuck in those small things that stress you out that in the greater scheme of things mean absolutely nothing.
Absolutely. And I think anyone listening who's even not an entrepreneur is going to understand that if they're feeling that anxiety and that stress, you do hyper focus on things that are like meaningless in the moment, but at the time they feel so important.
Mhm,
So it's like
mhm.
constantly having to look at your priorities and really, for me, it's like the zooming out and what do I really need to do? Because I get too hyper focused, too zoomed in, as you said, and then you're glued to a screen. I mean, I've had most of my career as a graphic designer where you literally are glued to the screen, right? So, and your whole career and what you're doing for a living is based on detail and perfectionism.
Mhm.
So that I
And
feel
then
like,
with your anxious wiring, you're
yeah,
naturally perfectionistic.
yeah, it's just like so my whole goal is to be, that recovering perfectionist and my whole motto for everything now is done is better than perfect. Like that's just how literally I go through every day. That's how I approach this podcast. Otherwise, not one episode would make it out the door. It wouldn't make it to the
Yeah.
airwaves because some of them, don't feel that as great as others or whatever it is we do. But it's the zooming out and realizing that in the big picture, these things, as you said, don't matter as much and we can't sweat the small stuff. I mean, there was that book years ago, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, that
Yeah.
was a huge movement, right?
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what do you feel is when it actually like, I just really want to ask skincare specific because I actually also came from I worked in the cosmetics industry. So this fascinates me. So selfishly, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. What do you feel that most people are missing in their skincare routine or they need to maybe add? Like what is that, everyone's always looking for this magic formula, but what do we
Mm.
need to do to take care of our skin? Let's ask it that way.
Nothing. You're adding too much.
Okay. Adding too much.
So, you know what the thing is, and maybe it's because I'm coming from a sensitive perspective. Maybe it's because I'm coming from a human rights background and it was never like my goal to be a trend setting beauty brand. But you have to go back to the basics. Just go back to the basics. Eat well, drink water. Skincare is never going to fix all of your problems,
Mhm.
ever. It comes from the inside and the outside. So if you have a wonderful moisturizer and you have a great cleanser, then just go with that. Just go back to the basics and good foundations. Stop swapping skincare all the time. Just keep it
Yes. Can we
simple.
just talk about that? Yes, you have to be consistent. So consistency is also one of my huge things in life. Like the consistency. And We live in a very flippant society, and with everything, we're just always looking for the next best thing, that shiny object syndrome. And with skincare, like my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you really need to be consistent with similar products or the same products for long periods of time to really get the benefit.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna try something new, then obviously you would have to try it for 3+ months to see if it has any effect. Most of us don't do that because we get really irritated that it's not working and we just throw it away and move on to the next thing.
Okay, so 3
So
months.
3 months is the
Okay.
golden rule.
Okay.
Um, but these are for things like targeted treatments and so on. If you're using a really great moisturizer, you should be able to see the effects
Mhm.
immediately, because the key thing here is making sure water doesn't evaporate from your skin and that your skin barrier is protected. That's the most important part. Another thing that I would say to look out for is this whole issue around ingredients and so on. At the end of the day, if you're buying skincare, you're the consumer, you're spending the money, it's coming out of your wallet. So make your own decisions on what you feel is okay for you and not okay for you. It's a personal decision, but make educated decisions on that. Read about it, do the research. FIGGI is free from many things, but we are free from what has been scientifically proven to be common irritants to sensitive skin, because that's what we do. If you have no reaction to fragrance, there is literally no reason for you to avoid it. Smell like a bouquet. I would certainly love to. So this whole fear around all of these, every day there's something new that we need to fear in an ingredient or something that's bad for this or bad for that. Make your own decisions and just keep it as simple and basic as possible.
Mhm. Simple and basic, absolutely. I noticed that you didn't have, like, an eye cream. I've never worn like, to me, that just, like, a good moisturizer. Can you just tell us that we just need a good moisturizer? We don't need all those fancy eye creams?
Well, you can buy the eye
Yeah?
cream, but you're gonna get a smaller tub for twice the price. And I guarantee if you turn it around and you look at the ingredients in your moisturizer and the eye cream, it's probably gonna be exactly the same.
Okay.
So just use your eye cream. Just use your moisturizer, not your eye cream. And also, the other thing is, if you're using an eye cream, it's probably because you have very specific concerns, like either dark circles or puffy eyes, which are two things that have completely different treatment methods and can only be solved by your dermatologist that probably needs to prescribe you something for that specific condition.
Okay.
If it's just like moisturizing in crow's feet, your moisturizer is your friend.
Okay. Thank you. I feel like you've given a lot of people permission to simplify things. And I think that's what we're always looking for, is just permission to do things in a simpler way. Like permission to meditate how you want, permission to do your skincare as something very simple. I just, yeah.
I don't know why, but we just love to complicate things, don't we? And it's so many things in life are just of such a way that it cannot be uncomplicated. So why would we
Mhm.
we want to
I
complicate?
know.
That
I know.
doesn't make any
Seriously, if we're complicating how we wash our face at night, I think there's like all hope is lost at this point. But
sense.
anyway, okay. So I want to end by asking you a question that I ask all my guests, and that is, in the spirit of helping people ditch the struggle, what do you believe is most important to commit to?
I really just believe that it's important to be okay and give into your limitations. I'll give you a practical example of that. I've taken you in this episode through my triggers and the things I need to be aware of. One of my limitations is that I probably just cannot work in the same way at the same pace as others may be able to. If I start feeling like I'm going down a bad path, I could say, well, today I think I should leave the office at 4, give myself a little break, go home a little sooner, but I don't do it because I feel I need to stay in the office and I need to get this done. And then the next day I have a panic attack and I have the panic hangover for a week and I'm useless. I could
Mm.
have taken 2 hours, listened to my limitations, and come back strong the next day. Now I've placed myself in an even worse position of stress because now I'm down for a week and I could have taken 2 hours.
Yeah, no, so helpful. And that's going back to listening to the manual, checking in to see what you need. And then it's like if I was to look at it through like a business lens, it's like it's the short-term sacrifice for the bigger picture, right? And that's what we need to consistently do. I love that you said that. Amazing.
Yeah.
So where can people find you and hear more about your story and also find your products?
So you can find me on Instagram at figgy.beauty, 2 Gs. And you can buy Figgy skincare at target.com, Amp Beauty on the figgybeauty.com website. We hope to launch in another big box retailer in May. If your audience is in the UK, we just opened our first brick and mortar store in Scotland if you want to go and peek in.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, and we have our online store in the UK as well, figgybeautyuk.com.
Amazing.
If you go to any of those sites, you will see everything about Figgy, Figgy Soul, my assistance to those that struggle with anxiety. Everything you can find there.
Yeah, I feel like you have so many amazing resources. I love it. It's like managing this and thriving through this from the inside out.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jeanne. I'm going to put all the links below so people can connect with you. And I really appreciate that transparency that you shared today. And I feel you really operating from a place of integrity with what you're bringing to the world.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I hope others feel it too.
They do. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. You showing up here means so, so much to me. To dig deeper into the topics discussed today and to learn about my work, visit alanarosa.com. And don't forget to download your free resources while you're there. And if this episode resonated with you, please share with others who also want to ditch the struggle. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and let me know what you'd like to see more of on this podcast. And before I go, I want to leave you with my 3 favorite ways to ditch the struggle. Be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.